Welcome everyone to the next edition of the Stand Course podcast. Today I have Jim Carbaugh, and he is an educator turned leadership coach who spent 35 years in the classroom and in school leadership. And he built an entire philosophy around 5 letters that his grandfather taught him in one life-changing week at his shop. His learn framework, listen, ethics, attitude, respect, and know, is now being adopted by schools and businesses to help build character, set boundaries, and lead with intention. And today we're going to talk about the ingredients for success for building a lasting culture. Jim, welcome to the Stand Course podcast.
Hey, thank you. This is fantastic. Great to be here. Been
Uh,
looking forward to this.
yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
super
hey,
excited.
I should have wore green today, but I didn't, and that's okay. You did. Yeah,
I
there
do
you go. I'm
my
blue.
green
Blue
on.
is Irish. And hey, Notre Dame colors we've got right now, green and blue. So we're good.
Perfect.
We're
You
good.
fit in. You're in it. You're in it to win it,
Absolutely.
Jim. Jim, before we get started, I ask all of my guests, what is your favorite food?
Oh man, that is so tough. Oh, that's like the last meal kind of thing. Uh, I can eat some stuff all day long. My favorite go to, I tell you what, recently it's been smash burgers.
Oh,
Have you had smash? I mean, they're just, you don't put anything on them. They just smash them down, throw an onion on there and some bread. But
so
if my
good.
go-to, I think would be like snow crab, or I'm on the East Coast, would be Maryland hard shell blue crabs
Nice.
with Old Bay. Yeah, I mean, I've
Mm,
been known to sit down at those all you can eat and be asked to leave.
I
Like,
love that. I
yeah, like
love
you
that.
paid 30 bucks to eat, buddy, and you've done excelled.
That's fun. I love, see, I'm a big seafood person, so
Yeah.
I appreciate a good seafood meal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Give it to me. Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Jim, let's get into this. Tell us a little bit about those ingredients for success and a little bit about the culture climate that we were talking about before.
Yeah. Well, um, we have to really seriously think about the climate we're working in. And I mean, you hear people complain about it all the time, but I often say that your climate controls your culture. And an example I shared with you, if people who lived in Alaska lived in Florida, their culture wouldn't be the same. So the
Right.
climate sets the culture. And so I think sometimes we focus so much on we got to have a great culture. We're not looking at the climate that we're creating, because that will flow into a culture over
Yes.
time. Over time we create that culture. So I mean, culture is a long-term thing, climate. And again, if you're wanting to change a culture, you got to change the climate.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think sometimes that's why we shift in leadership. Maybe you shift in people who are on your team and stuff, but sometimes that's a hard call. But to change that climate, you have to change some people potentially.
Well, and it's very interesting because if you listen to John Maxwell, everything rises and falls on leadership. So Jim is the leader creating the culture.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think sometimes we don't give leadership enough credit and sometimes we give it too much. That's obvious. I mean, it always frustrates me when I see, I watch sports. I was a former football coach. So when you see a team losing, it's all automatically it's the head coach. Well, maybe it is because of the culture he created, but sometimes, he doesn't play the game. But again, yeah, your leadership. When I look at schools and I go into schools,
Mm.
let's face it, the more visible you are as a leader in that school and you create that tone, and then you obviously in reinforce that tone with your faculty, and they buy into the type of personality or the type of tone you want to have, that creates that climate, and then that ultimately creates the culture you have in that school. And that's the same with a business or a restaurant.
Yeah.
That. I mean, I've been in restaurants where the owner, the head owner, I mean, I can think of an Italian restaurant we have locally. He's just not a nice person. And so, when you go in there, nobody's ever really nice. So eventually, I mean, it's not some place you go to a lot. But there are
Yeah.
some people who like that,
So I
right?
think the younger generations are getting nicer because we had
Yep.
all this like emotional intelligence stuff. But I think the ones that are a little bit older, that are getting ready to retire, they're sort of still in leadership roles. And it kind of screws everything up because the young people can't relate to that because they're so far, there's such a huge difference between the culture of the way young people and the way people have been indoctrinated into the corporate environment. There is an indoctrination, Jim.
Oh, there's an indoctrination to everything. I mean, come on, you kidding me? Doesn't matter where you work. People always, I see that all the time in education. Oh, we're indoctrinating them. Well, go work at some other major factory. You don't think they're going to indoctrinate you? I
I
mean, come
know.
on.
Yeah.
They want you to
Well,
do what they want you to do.
exactly. I think like the most interesting thing is in my career, I've worked in pharmaceutical industry, and you have to be a certain version of yourself to exist in that environment, the culture again. And so understanding like how to navigate that is an actual practice. And nobody's going to teach you that either. It's not like they're going to pull it out. All right, here's how you're going to duck and move and bend so you can last and survive in this culture right here. And I'm going to if you do these things right here, you're going to be able to survive this very hard, I want to call it hazing in a way. you know, but the problem is that no one's actually going to teach you that unless you have a good mentor.
It's funny when you were saying, I was saying you need to have a mentor, but that goes back to a word I've been hearing lately is assimilation, right? I mean, you have to be able to be willing to give up some of yourself to make it. I mean, if you're going to be hardcore and say, this is the way I am and I'm not changing or I'm not going to adapt,
Mm,
well, again, people often say, well, you're the dinosaur. Well, you are the dinosaur
yeah.
because if you don't adapt, it's what happens. And that's unfortunate. That's the thing, your leaders, there are a lot of great leaders that are in their 40s all the way up to their 60s and even near that, but they've been adaptable their entire careers. And they've been smart enough to bring in that young crowd and share the culture that is at the building or wherever they're at and say, okay, what is it we need to adjust to blend the two together? And they're willing to give something up.
Yeah.
And they're also willing to put some people in charge and say, hey, you're going to make this happen. But again, that's finding that right formula. And, that kind of ties in. The only way you're ever going to do that when we talk about, the keys to ingredient success, the only way you're going to ever really do that is first you have to, if you're going to lead, you got to listen. You have got to have your ears to everything.
Yeah.
And too often we want to throw those things out. Oh, the people are always complaining. People are always, well, yeah, they are going to complain. Um, well, what are they complaining about and why? And what are those pressure points?
Right.
Ironically, I sat on a Zoom committee call here just recently about education, and they were talking about the top 4 things educators want. And I was laughing as they were talking as well. I said, well, there's the same things that people were talking about when I got into education 35 years ago.
Yeah.
So why
Nothing
are they
has
still
changed.
existing? Why, and if we did change them, where's the result? You can't continually say, well, I want more money. You can't continually say, I want more time. I can't continually say, I want this. Well, what, if we're getting that, now what? And you sometimes you got to give people what they want, but you got to listen. And that goes on both sides though, too. I mean, and I think people want to be heard, right? So it's very important when a leader can sit down and can truly listen and they actually then repeat what he's actually heard from people, but then relate to them where he's coming from, right? I mean, where am I coming from? And is there some assimilation we can do there? Is there some we can all be happy, but you have again, if you're down in the organization, as I used to say to teachers, you're in the front lines. You want the building to run right. Well, here are all the things that the principal's up against.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that. So when you're upset because you want this and it didn't happen, well, if you know what the playing field's about, is there a happy medium? Is there some reason? Is some way we can get around that? And
Yeah.
that only happens if you listen. I mean, that's
Exactly. And listen at all different levels, right? So
absolutely,
it's
absolutely.
the listen before you lead. And there's so much to this part of it because there's
Uh,
the person in charge and then there's the people that report to that leader. So the leadership team. And so part of the problem could be somebody on that leadership team. And so being able to listen at all the different levels to what's going on is really key, I think, especially with the culture, because you
mhm.
just need one bad person, Jim. You need one bad one to screw everything up.
You see that all the time. It doesn't. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and you need one bad person, one person who interprets that. That's the other thing about listening is make sure you're hearing what you're hearing, right?
That
You got to
right.
clear your brain. You can't be sitting there interpreting what you
Yes.
think you heard,
Exactly.
and
Yes.
that's the hard part of a leader is, again, uh, when I was even a teacher, when I led my administrative team and my teacher teams, and even when I was a coach, when I had my assistant coaches, as we ended our meeting, I would say, okay, let's clarify what we just talked about and what it is. You have to summarize that
Yeah.
because you don't want anybody walking out of the room with an assumption.
There's two
Yeah.
parts to this I want to bring up. Okay, this is two things. So the first one is that as a leader, we need to go in and listen to learn with curiosity,
Right.
not listen to fix and not listen to win. This is part of my listening class that I do. And so going in with curiosity is going to be key. And the second piece is this. I love to say this. Communication doesn't happen unless the listener says it does. So the communication doesn't even happen. So you could be listening and the person could be talking, but if the person that you're listening to or the person that is listening to you doesn't say or understand you correctly, then communication actually didn't happen. And I think that's part of the problem is that we think we're communicating, but we're not
Oh,
getting that direct feedback that we need to validate what we're actually saying.
absolutely. One of the things when I work with some leadership teams, as I'll say, one of the parameters you set up when you're listening is if I'm around the table and we're all talking and somebody has a point, if you have something you would like to add, or maybe you even want to counter it or whatever, you should repeat or summarize what they said. In other words, I would say, hey, Julie, I really appreciate what you brought. And, that one point was really good, but I think I have a better idea because then I've acknowledged that I actually heard what you said. I
Mm,
wasn't just laying in the background waiting to pop my point,
yeah.
and overrule you. And of course, the big thing there is hard for a lot of people in the room because they're leaders is let's leave our ego at the door, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not about whose idea it was. It's the fact that we got the right idea.
It's amazing. It's so interesting. It's so interesting, especially when you work in big organizations and how this all plays out. It's so much different on the small business side. It's the culture is different because as the small business owner, you're creating the culture and you get to pick who you want to work with. And when you're in a company, you don't get to pick who you want to work with. It's not, you just get to work with who is there.
Yeah, and the sad part is there are some things that as a large company, even a small company, there are things you can do to put the right people together.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things you can do out there. There's personality tests and all that stuff. And sometimes we think we have that innate ability to pick. Working with people that you don't really connect with can really be a tough thing, and that can interfere with the listening part because then it's just a matter of survival. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, everyone's always jockeying for position. And I think you have to remove that as well too.
Yeah. That's
And that's the
hard.
key, but it is hard because everyone's always, again, if it's Jim's idea, oh, well, he's got the kudos with the boss.
Yeah.
Well, it isn't about that. There's a lot of pressure on that if it's your idea.
There is a lot of pressure. What is the next ingredient?
Well, I tell you, the next year, the big thing I think always, and it comes down, it's personal, but it's also with a company. But personally, again, you yourself, you got to have some non-negotiables. And in my framework, that's the ethics of life, and that's your
Mm,
values. And that's something that you really have to sit down and they've done all kinds of studies. And I could say, hey, and I've done this with leadership teams. Okay, everybody, I give them a note card and say, okay, I want you to write down your non-negotiable, write down your values. And it's amazing. Some people they'll have a list of 10, but then you have to start striking them off. No, what are your non-negotiables? The things that you
yeah.
are not going and usually you end up getting three, right? Three, maybe five if you're lucky. Yeah. And you have to stay with those. They've got to become the non-negotiables. Well, here's what's really interesting. Now, when you do that with a leadership team, if you have them say, look, I want you to list your top five. Just and if you only come up with three, that's great, but you got to list your non-negotiables. And one might be listening, one might be, trustworthiness, one might be being truthful, whatever those, if you list them. If you then go to a whiteboard or go to old paper, whatever, and you start writing down everybody's, you take those and summarize them, you'll find out that everybody in the room has probably three of them in common.
Right.
And now you look at each other and say, okay, so why are we not getting along? Why are we not communicating? There's no reason not to, because we all have the same values. We all have the non-negotiables.
Sure.
And those have to guide you. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can often go back, and I've told this to my kids who are now grown. I've said, I've told them when I made bad decisions in life, there's a lot of times when I sat back when things didn't go my way, I realized that I stretched my negotiables and went outside of them.
Right.
And I probably should have stopped me, but
Yeah.
nah, I can do it this time.
I love the non-negotiables. I think like we need to communicate that to people and then also with ourselves because we also need to continuously check in with ourselves because what I saw happen in my life is that I stayed at jobs for too long where the culture wasn't like working for me, but it was out of necessity and, you know,
Yeah,
survival. It was really out of survival that I had to stay.
sure. But again, what were you doing while you had to stay? Hopefully, you were sending out your feelers and looking for something else as well, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
sometimes, yes.
yeah. It's ironic. When I was interviewing to become an administrator and get out of the classroom, I had an interview at a school district as to be an assistant principal, and they had to tape the room set up where they had teachers on one side and the administrative team on the other side, and there were questions being fired back and forth at me, and each question was counterintuitive to each other one.
My God.
And when the interview was over, I walked out and the secretary says, "Hey, by the way, there's a written part of your exam or your interview. You have to go in this room and they give you a prompt and you have to write. They want to see your writing ability." I said, "I'm good." And she says, "No, you have to." I said, "No, I don't. I don't have to do this. I'm good." During that interview, I realized that these two teams were not getting along. And why did I want to be a part of that?
Oh,
It
yes.
was within my non-negotiables. So ironically, I ended up getting a phone call the next day from the principal who interviewed and said, "Why didn't you do the pass?" I said, "There's no need. I didn't want to get into it." The following day, I got a phone call from the superintendent. So, look, everybody was really impressed. They really like to have you finish this part of it. So, because we have to have our check marks. And I just finally said, "Look, there's obviously some issues there. I don't want to be a part of it. I'm not coming into a team that's not getting along. I'm not going to be pulled into the middle." Those teachers were trying to find out if I was going to be on their side. The administrative team was looking for someone who's going to be there on their side. I said it was obvious people were not getting along,
Wow.
and I'm not going to be a part of that. And it ended up into a really long conversation. And he still I said, "No, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not." I said, "Anybody who is a change agent realizes they have to be there for a short period of time."
Yeah,
And
that's
I'm not.
hard.
I
That's
said, "Plus,
tough.
I'm going to be an assistant. What role does that really have for me? I'm going to end up ticking a whole bunch of people off." So yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it was my core values that during that meeting I started thinking, is this really what I want? I mean, these people are no, I'm out. I'm out. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes people need to do that. And you're in the middle of an interview, and if it just isn't going right, you just hey,
It's such a good story. I had an interview like this once, and they wanted me so badly for the job because I was probably one of the only people that could battle them back with answers. And I was like, is this for real? Are you guys going to throw questions? So it was like three or four people on the panel, and they're throwing questions at me like we were playing tennis. And I'm like, what is going on here? And so I'm like sitting here like this, and I'm like, doing that is just kind of like what you were talking about. And, but I didn't really think like maybe there's something else going on here. I just thought like, oh, is this their way of interviewing me? But then when they offered me the job, they were like, we really like you. Because I was the only one that could probably stand in that stressful position and battle these people at once. But
yeah,
I
they were
didn't.
looking for that. They were looking for both sides, didn't even realize it. In my case, and in your case, what I'm hearing
Yeah.
is both sides were looking for someone who was going to come in and change the climate and the culture because they weren't willing to do it themselves. They weren't willing to hold each other accountable and call each other out. And they didn't share, they had shared non-negotiable, but they didn't even want to talk about them.
Yeah.
They were hung up in their egos and I, in my field in education, you get hung up in the us and them, the
Mm,
teachers versus the administration. I say, why? We're all here to educate kids. If you're not here to do things for kids, then we shouldn't even be talking.
right.
So I'm not here to combat you, but
Exactly.
and again, maybe I was lucky. I spent 18 years in the classroom, so it was very easy to relate. I knew where they were coming from. Um, But sometimes as a teacher, you have to adapt and move on. You can't just expect everything to fall in line. And that's part of how the whole learn became very successful, because it was in the classroom. You just told kids to look, we're going to learn every day. And that's the thing we have to do. We're going to listen, ethics, attitude, respect, and know. And if we do those 5 things, we're going to have a good class. We're going to have a good time in the class. I mean,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah. So, but yeah, the non-negotiables. There's so many examples of that, but I think a lot of people sometimes, again, out of desperation, out of need, like you said, you were in a job where again, um, if you're in a job like that, they're hitting your non-negotiables, then you need to start reaching out, and you need to interview with purpose.
Find a new place.
Yeah, and sometimes you just turn it down. I mean, maybe you have to stay in a bad situation and continue to learn until you find that spot where you fly in, and it's where it's at. But you're going to be happier, and the great part is you work better with people who are in the same non-negotiables as you, and you're going to learn from people that are in the same non-negotiables as you. You think about the same ethics and values, and you'll listen to people in the same value system.
All right, let's get to the last ingredient.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, this is the big one. This is one we spend a lot of time on in a lot of things, and that's no. And there's two parts of that. The first one is what's no. What are your boundaries? Right now, some people say, well, that links back into your non-negotiables, but you have to have boundaries. And I think too many times people don't define their boundaries. Like, this is not what I'm going to do. And if someone and I have plenty of examples there. And if that's not what I'm going to do, then I'm prepared to lose my job. I'm prepared to leave. Whatever. I mean, that's a no. The other part of no is you're going to get them. There is no, I mean, I always say it's the first word I ever learned to spell. I mean, no.
No.
You automatically, right? What part of no don't you get? N-O, well, you're going to get no's. How do you get over them?
Right.
How do
It's
you
like
get past them?
we're hardwired for no.
Yeah, we get hardwired for no, and we start thinking no is permanent, and it's not. It's not final. And the next yes you get came from all the no's that you decided to get over.
Yeah.
When you think about that, whether you got through them, worked around them, or just accepted them and went into a different path, that's how you got your next yes.
Mm-hmm.
If you continue to wane and hang out and on a no, that's the biggest roadblock you're going to ever have.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are no's that are permanent, and it's, look, I just can't do this. It's just not good. There's others that you have to, and that's the other thing, is be willing to ask why. If someone gives you a no, say, well, why? As I used to say to people, if you can't give me a why you're giving me a no, I don't know if it's a good no. It must be based on emotion.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
and the thing is, it's kind of like in sales, when somebody is selling something, the first thing that somebody's going to say to you is like, I'm not buying anything, or I'm just looking. Do you need any help? No, I'm just looking. No, 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 I'm just looking. And so the first thing is people want to stay status quo. That's the whole point of our lives. We just want to stay as is. But the point is that we're not going to get any further than we have gotten if we stay the same. And now with technology and AI and automation and all these new things, like we have to be in the attitude of, well, what if instead of no? Well, what
yeah.
if? Let's take away the word no and just let's explore what if for a minute, you know? And I think it's so important because people are stuck in their old ways. They don't want to change. And especially in the corporate space, people are so protective of their job that they are probably so resistant to new technology because they're coming for them. And
Oh,
instead of
absolutely.
right, we're in the next like 3 years, we're going to see a total shift in the landscape of work. I believe that the entrepreneur is going to be the new corporate executive. Like we're going to shift from working in traditional companies for people hiring fractional people and working in a more fluid way. I think that's going to happen in the next few years. And I think that there are thought leaders and people that are preparing for the way, we're seeing the future before the future is even happening. I know that I'm seeing it. I don't know if companies are seeing it and people are seeing it yet, but usually when I get an intuition thing like this, I'm kind of on the right track because no longer are you going to be able to keep the same job for 30 years, right? You're going to have to figure out something new. And I should be like doing a commercial for Claude AI because I'm obsessed. I got to get these guys on my show. Literally obsessed with this thing. I can't even believe the stuff that these machines are doing for small business owners and I'm sure leaders as well in companies. But we have to be open to that.
Yeah, and let's face it, it comes from not understanding it. And again, if you're not willing to adapt, and it's not the answer to everything, but yeah, I mean, if you're not going to embrace what's coming, but no, again, like you just said, I mean, the what ifs. I've actually ran into some people where, well, we're just not going to engage with AI. Well, then you're just not going to engage. It's life's going to pass you by. Ironically, I just read an article. They talked about what they were talking about superpowers that people have and all that stuff, and they were saying they believe and this was from one of Elon's close friends, that his power of no, he guards his time, he
Yeah,
guards his thought processes because people are always pulling on
get
him,
that.
and he lays out no a lot. But it's because he wants to protect. He has his five things or his three things he's doing,
Yeah,
and everyone is always saying, "Oh, he's doing so much." No, he's not really. But that's the way he's able to advance. So he's laser focused, and he's able to advance. He isn't trying to be and what they always say, you can't be everything to everybody, but you got people
sure.
constantly trying to do that. And I think that's what people with AI right now are trying to do. They're fine at doing all these things, and they're doing stuff that's not focusing them. But yeah, you're right. AI is going to change a lot. I don't know if you saw it. I just saw where a guy in Florida uh, went out to Claude and basically typed in all his information and listed his house, put it on the MSLS, whatever that stuff is, did all that stuff, and he sold it within 3 days. And basically now the big thing is, well, why do you need a realtor? Why do you need to give somebody 6%? I'm not
Yeah.
not
It's
but
crazy.
I
The
mean it's
stuff
just
that this
crazy.
thing is doing is ridiculous. I feel a little bit like a superhero because I have a superhuman ability. It's almost like you take your wisdom and your knowledge and you put it into this machine and it just does everything you want it to do. It's the most amazing thing I've experienced. And if you're not taking advantage of it, you've already missed the boat. You're
Oh,
already
absolutely.
behind.
Hey,
Yeah.
you know what's great about it is you can put an idea and say, here's what you could actually say, here's what I was thinking. It's all about how you write the prompts, right?
Yeah,
Here's what I was thinking. What am I missing? And when you read through that, you're going, yeah, and you would have gotten there. You most likely would have gotten there, but how many more tries would you have had? Or how
yeah.
long would it have taken you? 6 months. Now you're there.
It's amazing. I just
Yeah.
asked it yesterday or the day before to create for me an entire funnel. I put all my information in. These are all my things that I have as offers. How do I build it so it comes into a funnel? It designed the funnel, the marketing, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, that in like 5 minutes, not even." But it's all about your ability to be curious. I think that's the bottom line for everything that we're talking about is that
Absolutely.
leaders need to be curious, they need to be listening. They need to understand when what their non-negotiables are, and they need to understand when to say no and when not to say no and when to turn no into a what if.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the minute your curiosity, there's in life, we either get better or we get worse. Nothing stays the same.
Mm,
So if you're not listening, you're not, staying within your values, and you're not, pressing the no or going past the no, you're staying the same. And
yeah,
you can't stay the same. You're going to get worse. People are going to pass you. It's that
exactly.
simple. Nothing stays the same. Better
Mm.
or worse.
Better or worse? Jim, this has been an amazing conversation. Where can our audience find out more about you?
Well, you can go to jimcarbaugh.com. A lot of information there. I do have a website that I'm currently blending into jimcarbaugh.com, which is All Points Leadership, but that's soon going to disappear. But you'll find all the information and connection at jimcarbaugh.com. And I will put a plug out. I do have a new book coming out, hopefully here in May, but it's geared more towards the educational area.
Awesome.
It's taken my learn, and it's actually I've been asked so many times, how do you do the framework? So I've took the time to sit down and put it all together in here you go, follow it.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Jim, for your time today. And thank you for being a guest on the
No,
Stay on
thank
Course
you very much. This has
podcast.
been great. I hope it helps.